All right, and my colleague Jessica Taneja joins me from Tianjin, China. She's thoroughly covering the SCO Summit. Hi, Jessica. Take us through Prime Minister Narendra Modi's engagements today and also key takeaways from PM Modi and President Xi Jinping's meeting, which happened earlier in the day.
Well, Siddharth, the last time Prime Minister Narendra Modi had attended the SCO Summit was in Qingdao in 2018, and this is coming after 7 years when he's attending the SCO Summit, and he met with President Xi Jinping as expected on the sidelines of the SCO Summit, the first bilateral for the Prime Minister as he arrived in Tianjin. An important one at that as well, because it builds up on the momentum where the two had left. That was at the BRICS Summit in Kazan in Russia last year, where a disengagement pact was also signed before they met, which would sort of allow some ease of tensions between the two countries and to move in a direction where the relationship becomes more constructive, and trade facilitation along with, resumption of flights, etc., would continue to go on. Now, peace and tranquility on the border in order to resume trade was India's primary concern and demand as well, because with what we've seen in the recent past, it is important that India would make this mention that trade could continue, but at least this disengagement and delimitation and many other aspects of this relationship and concerns were to be addressed, which by the statements, if you read, would give you an idea of things certainly improving in a direction, but of course, there's always a step of caution in this relationship as well. So I think that remains, but at the same time, things seem to be changing when it comes to India and China ties, but certainly in a direction where it looks slightly constructive, especially on the border issue. The SR level talks resumed after nearly 4 years, where you saw NSA Ajit Doval in Beijing, and then Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, had come to India to extend an invitation of the SCO Summit to the Prime Minister, also meeting his counterpart, Dr. S. Jaishankar, as well as NSA Ajit Doval. So it's a build up on that mechanism. Of course, the SR level mechanism has helped quite a lot of, made quite a lot of progress in this direction, and so have others. You saw the resumption of Kailash Mansarovar Yatra as well after nearly 4 years, and also talks about the modalities when it comes to resumption of direct flights, and that is something a lot of businessmen are waiting as well. Importantly, there was an export control on rare earth minerals, which during Wang Yi's visit was also assured would be lifted, and India would be receiving those rare earth minerals and magnets, which are very important for the electronics industry, specifically for the EV industry, and also lithium and other solar power generation equipment, as well as batteries. So the relationship has moved in that direction where there is certain ease in the tensions, and that is leading to facilitation of trade to be much more smoother, and of course the Chinese side that is looking for more investments in Indian markets.
Definitely. Jessica, stay with us. We also have Professor Harshvardhan Pant, who is joining us on the broadcast. He is Vice President, Observer Research Foundation, is joining us today. Sir, a very warm welcome on the DD India News Hour. We heard Prime Minister Modi's remarks during his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, where he touched on several key issues, including the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, the resumption of direct flights between the two countries. Given the recent thaw in diplomatic relations, how do you see India-China ties evolving from here?
I think this is a good moment where India and China seems to have finally provided a roadmap for the future evolution of this very important partnership. For India, this is a very important relationship, given China being India's most important neighbor. For China, this is important because China is looking for newer markets as the older markets in the West dry up for China. So there is, as the Chinese say, win-win here, which should be explored and exploited by both sides, and that is exactly what the Prime Minister also tried to do during his visit. The question certainly going forward would be how committed Chinese are to this roadmap. In the past, we have seen Chinese go back on their words, whether they can continue to work around the framework that the two leaders have evolved. That will be a big test of their commitment, of their resolve in taking India-China relations to a new level after the downward slide we had seen post Galwan. So I think both sides are signaling that they are ready to move on. Both sides are signaling that they are ready to cooperate. The question, I think, for many in India would be whether China will stick to the both the letter and the spirit of the statement and letter and the spirit of the relationship as it has been embodied now in the statements of the Prime Minister and President Xi.
A big test of China's commitment. That's what our guest is saying. I would like to go back to our correspondent Jessica Taneja, who is there in Tianjin. Jessica, since its inception, the SCO Summit has focused on countering terrorism, extremism, separatism. What is there this time around? What can we expect?
Well, it'll be an extension of the agreements as well as the proposed projects and initiatives that they have taken forward. For example, for India, the rights of the regional anti-terror system or the mechanism is important, and these are kind of initiatives that India also agreed upon, given the kind of spate of terror attacks that India has witnessed. Recent one in Pahalgam, in Jammu and Kashmir. So certainly there are a lot of initiatives that center around how to combat terrorism, because that is what concerns most of these countries. And if you look at the other member nations as well, and you have and all the dialogue partners and observers as well, you have Armenia and Azerbaijan as well, and you have Iran as well as other countries. So of course many countries witnessing conflict at the same time, and of course for India, importantly, it's a matter of concern when it comes to including the fact that India has been at the receiving end of such terrorist attacks, and they need absolute condemnation, especially when it comes to this particular summit as well. You saw Defence Minister Rajnath Singh as well when he attended the SCO's Defence Ministers meet. He had particularly made a mention that Pahalgam terror attack should be mentioned, but that wasn't the case, and India didn't end up signing that declaration. So we'll have to wait and see as to how the entire proceedings go. But for India, it will be important to focus on how terrorist activities can be reduced or minimized with the help of other leaders, and what kind of coordination can go in to have that mechanism in place. Siddharth.
Correct. Jessica and Professor Pant, stay with us. I'll just get back to you. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of Summit of the Leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Tianjin. The two leaders welcomed the positive momentum and steady progress in bilateral relations since their last meeting in Kazan in October 2024. They reaffirmed that the two countries were development partners and not rivals. PM underlined the importance of peace and tranquility on the border areas for continued development of bilateral relations. The two leaders noted with satisfaction the successful disengagement last year. They also noted the need to strengthen people-to-people ties through direct flights and visa facilitation, building on the resumption of Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and tourist visa. The PM noted that India and China both pursue strategic autonomy, and their relations should not be seen through a third country lens. PM Modi invited President Xi to the BRICS summit that India will be hosting in 2026. Prime Minister Modi also had a meeting with Mr. Kai Chi, member of the Standing Committee of the Politburo of Communist Party of China. All right, and we are again going back to our correspondent Jessica Taneja, who is joining us from Tianjin, China, and also Professor Harsh Vardhan Pant, who is joining us on the broadcast. Professor Pant, now how we are looking at the significance of this summit, especially from India's perspective amid ongoing geopolitical tensions and the intensifying impact of Trump's tariffs?
I think India-China relationship has been improving since last October.
Correct.
The two nations came to an agreement on how can we move beyond the change of unilateral change of status quo that China had imposed during the Galwan crisis. So I think a lot that is happening in the India-China space has to be construed through that lens. What Mr. Trump's tariffs have done is to galvanize perhaps this process, because both China and India at this point in time need a greater sense of economic stability. Both are emerging economies, both are emerging economic powerhouses that require a certain predictability and that perhaps need to push back against the kind of volatility that President Trump is inducing into the global economic order. And that's why this meeting is so important. I don't think a large part of the world is looking at this, what is happening in China through the SCO lens. They are looking at what will happen here through the lens of India-China engagement. So I think that brings this relationship back to the center stage. This summit, of course, SCO Summit is supposed to talk about terrorism, extremism, separatism, that are the evils that SCO is to counter, has to counter its inception, and has not been very successful. So it remains to be seen what this summit achieves in terms of the substance of its founding principles. But I think what is the most important part of this summit so far is the India-China engagement and what the two leaders are saying about building their ties after what happened at Galwan in 2020.
Correct. Jessica, I want to ask you that is this meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping sending out a strong message to the global world? What's your analysis on this?
Well, the engagement between the two leaders is quite restricted to the SCO format. Of course, the bilateral meeting had certain outcomes which did give us a sense of how the relationship is moving, especially when you talk about China, who is one of our largest trading partners, and in fact, and the Chinese are looking at more investment and diversification of their investment, especially Indian markets and Indian companies. It is an interesting time, as they say, when the world is struck by tariffs at this point. So given that kind of geopolitical complexity, the two looking at the relationship in a sense where economic ties could be strengthened is certainly going to go a long way. But then again, it will be important to see on how this moves forward, because with China it will be important to see whether they walk the talk or not, and how predictable is this relationship in terms of its outcomes in the future, because there is always a certain sense of unpredictability. But with this, at this point, it will only be some time when we know on how this entire setup or mechanism works out. But from what we know, from what we understand, when we're given to understand that the SR level talks resume, it certainly paved the way, at least to start off with the basics like resumptions of flight and the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra.
Correct.
So of course we'll have to wait and see on how the other issues are addressed so far. But what it does seem to be that the two leaders want to engage, on an economic front more and more, given the kind of uncertainties that surround the world today.
Okay, Jessica, we'll keep taking your updates, but as of now, we leave it there. Thank you so much. And we are still joined by Professor Harsh Vardhan Pant, Vice President, Observer Research Foundation, who is joining us. Sir, what's your assessment of this meeting between the two leaders as far as the critical mineral supply is concerned?
I think what we have seen in the last few weeks is China gradually, at least in principle, saying that they will resume those supplies. So that's something that I think goes in the context of what the two leaders have suggested, that they are partners, economic partners, and their economic vision should align. And I think that is in consonance with this idea that what the two nations need to do is to look at their economic relationship beyond the problem of weaponization of certain aspects of this relationship. And I think with China that had been a problem. Chinese have been weaponizing every single aspect of their economic ties with other nations, including India, when it comes to so I think when it comes to over-reliance, when it comes to trade and technology, when it comes to supply chains, when it comes to minerals, we have seen a lot of negativity around Chinese economic coercion. I think now Indian Prime Minister's statement makes it very clear that there has to be a mutual sensitivity and mutual respect in dealings with each other, and that should be the basis of the engagement, as well as peace and tranquility along the border. So I think India has made it very clear that it is coming into this meeting not through the lens of any third country, but in response to the bilateral relationship that is with China, that India is beginning to build up after the disastrous affair of Galwan, where China unilaterally changed the status quo along the border. So I do think that this is an attempt by both sides to build a relationship based on equality. India's position certainly remains very clear. China will have to think whether it wants to continue partnership with India on this basis, and therefore, when it comes to critical minerals and rare earth minerals, it will have to ensure that it is not weaponizing that aspect of its trade reliance, because that will lead to this concern in India about the reliability of China as a partner. And I think the trust deficit that is widening with China can be bridged if China becomes more consistent, more transparent, and predictable in its behavior on economic matters. So that is going to be, I think, the fundamental
indeed.
Way out of
indeed.
this
But we have seen a welcoming statement from President Xi Jinping. How does this relationship, sir, between the two economic powerhouses matter to the rest of the world when it comes to global geopolitics and global economic landscape?
Very, very important for various reasons. And therefore, when today there is so much spotlight on Mr. Modi's visit to China, the reason is that I think a lot of the Western media is concerned that is Trump alienating India with its behavior, and will a new phase in India-China relationship mean that West would get further marginalized? And I think that is the question that a large part of the world is asking, and therefore there is so much interest in this meeting. For two most populous countries, for two most economically powerful countries to come together to build their relationship, of course, offers a signal of stability in a world order which is becoming more volatile by the day. And the more Trump administration makes life difficult for other nations, the more important it is for countries like China and India to work together, to come together, to ensure that stability prevails in the global geo-economic space. And I think that's what the message of this meeting is going to be in large parts of the world.
Definitely, sir. Thank you so much for joining in on DD India News Hour. Thank you so much.